Hey everybody, today's topic for Aspie Life is sensory overload. And if you like what you see here, feel free to hit the like button, comment below, subscribe to my channel, and feel free to share the video. Anyways, what is sensory overload? Sensory overload, something I experienced yesterday after leaving the quarter marathon and getting my donut for my reward, was something I experienced because of all the crowds, not just the crowds, the weather, all the noise, the excitement. It was just so much going on at once, and then I just almost crashed. And I had to go home and take a few hours to myself to recharge before hitting up the gym. Anyway, sensory overload is where everything happens at once. And for me, it's if there's too much routine change, too much excitement all in one day. And sensory overload is if there's like going to a big event or family function or a trip and not having any time to mentally prepare or to plan. And a sensory overload happens even after something, you go somewhere, especially somewhere really busy, and it's just so much at once. The noises, the bright lights, or even the weather, different smells, different background noises. So that's why it takes a lot for me when I go out in public. I have to really plan, I really have to prepare, and I have to make sure I'm really ready, not just mentally, emotionally, physically, sensory-wise too. And when there's too much going on at once and there's not enough time for me to recharge, that's when I start to experience what's called the sensory overload. And a sensory overload literally feels like a pressure cooker just ready to pop. And when that sensory overload hits, it's literally a volcanic eruption. For me, I know when my mood changes from being really happy, excited, to suddenly being really quiet, just suddenly being really mad and snappy. Or when I have to leave somewhere to take a minute, especially at a family function where I have to go to a room to recharge. And if I don't get that time to recharge, or if I don't have that time to mentally prepare, going inside and seeing everybody, it can cause an overload, which leads to a meltdown. And this is quite common for people on the autism spectrum, and not just with kids. It's also really common with adults on the spectrum. Another thing that causes sensory overload is autistic masking. I often will pass for being neurotypical, but it's having to mask so much at once, and too much social interaction all at once for me will cause that sensory overload, especially when I don't have enough time to really plan or prepare, and I don't have time to take a minute to myself to recharge. So one of the ways that I've coped with a sensory overload is learning how to take care of myself. And what that means, it could be going for a walk. Before going to a family function, I'll go for a walk around the block before I even step foot into the doors to say hi to everybody. And the reason why I do this is because of either the long car ride, or if I take the train, the long train ride. And having that time to mentally prepare, just all that, and then going somewhere different. That's one way that I cope with things happening before an overload comes. So it's knowing when the overload is about to come and knowing what your triggers are. It took me years to learn what triggered me and how to deal with them. Like for me, it was when I did the quarter marathon, it was fun. Afterwards, because I started to feel myself getting into that overload, my friend, he offered to hang out again, and I just had to say, I would, but I need time to myself to recharge, because I knew how I was getting and I didn't want him to see me like that. And even before I went to the gym, I ended up taking that time to mentally prepare, going to walk to the gym, because I love to go for a walk. And it was great. I had that to myself. So I was able to go there and just decompress, let it out, go into beast mode, because for me, that's been a release. Another thing that helps me that I find is being in a room by myself, door closed, and just having time to myself with nobody until I know I'm ready. And then I'll slowly come out of the room little by little. And I can't do that on anybody else's time but my own. But that's one way that I cope with the family functions and dealing with sensory overload. And even sometimes having to leave and not putting myself in a position where an overload's gonna happen. And that could be somewhere that, for an example, could be too loud. And if it's too loud, I'll just bring headphones with me, listen to music. That's how I prepare myself with taking the train. Don't take it at times where it's going to be super crowded, because that could be an overload. Or before going to work, if there's any changes, I find that I have to clarify and make sure that, is there changes? Is it still the same? And that's how I don't set myself up for a meltdown. And sometimes change can happen. But another way that I've learned how to cope with sensory overload is having a stress ball with me in my purse, or having a book to read with headphones on, of course. Or I love to knit, so bringing a knitting project with me, like a pair of socks, a sweater, that is what I found helped me. And just remember, what works for one person, it might not work for another. But I hope this video helps to explain what sensory overload is, what it feels like, and some different coping strategies. Again, if you like what you see, hit the like button, subscribe to my channel if you wish, or comment below. I'd love to hear some feedback. Thank you, everybody.